Old path, white clouds, walking in the footsteps of the Buddha. Chapter 1. Walking just to walk. Under the shadows of the green bamboo, the young bhikkhu Svasti sat crossed-legged, concentrating on his breath. He had been meditating for more than an hour in the bamboo forest monastery, while hundreds of other bhikkhus were also practicing under the shade of the bamboo trees or in their own thatched huts. The great teacher Gautama, whom people affectionately called the Buddha, lived in the monastery with nearly 400 disciples. Although crowded, it was very peaceful. 40 acres surrounded the monastery, and many varieties of graceful bamboo from all over Magadha were planted there. Just a 30 minutes walk north of the capital city of Rajagaha, the bamboo forest monastery had been given to Buddha and his community by King Bimbisara 7 years earlier. Svasti rubbed his eyes and smiled. His legs were still tender as he slowly uncrossed them. 21 years old, he had been ordained 3 days earlier by the Venerable Sariputta, one of the Buddha's senior disciples. During the ordination ceremony, Swasti's thick brown hair was shaved off. Svasti was very happy to be part of the Buddha's community. Many bhikkhus were of noble birth, such as the Venerable Nanda, the Buddha's brother, and Devadatta, Anuruddha, and Ananda. Although Svasti had not yet been introduced to these men, he had noticed them from afar. Even in faded robes, their noble bearing was unmistakable. It will be a long time before I can be friends with men of such noble birth, thought Svasti. And yet, even though the Buddha himself was the son of a king, Svasti felt no gulf between them. Svasti was an untouchable, lower than the lowest and poorer caste, according to the system of discrimination among the people of India at that time. For more than 10 years, he had tended water buffaloes, but for 2 weeks now, he was living and practicing with monks from all castes. Everyone was very kind to him, offering him warm smile and deep bows. But he did not yet feel at ease. He suspected it might take years before he could feel completely comfortable. Suddenly, a broad smile emerged from deep within him as he thought of Rahul, the Buddha's 18-year-old son. Rahul had been a novice in the community since the age of 10, and in just 2 weeks, Rahul and Svasti had become best friends. It was Rahul who taught Svasti how to follow his breath during meditation. Rahul understood the Buddha's teachings well, even though he was not yet a bhikkhu. He needed to wait until he was 20 before he could receive full ordination. Svasti reflected on the time just 2 weeks before, when the Buddha came to Uruvela, his small village near Gaya, to invite him to become a monk. When the Buddha arrived at his home, Svasti was out with his brother Rupak, taking care of the buffaloes. His 2 sisters, Bala, aged 16, and Bhima, aged 12, were there, and Bala recognized the Buddha right away. She began to run out to find Svasti, but the Buddha told her it wasn't necessary. He said that he and the monks traveling with him, including Rahul, would walk to the river to find her brother. It was late afternoon when they came upon Svasti and Rupak scrubbing down their 9 buffaloes in the Niranjara river. As soon as they saw the Buddha, the young men ran up the bank of the river, joined their palms to form a lotus bud, and bowed deeply. "You have grown so much," the Buddha said, smiling warmly at Svasti and his brother. Svasti was speechless. Seeing the Buddha's peaceful face, his warm and generous smile, and his brilliant, penetrating eyes moved him to tears. The Buddha wore a saffron robe made of patches sewn together in pattern of a rice field. He still walked barefoot as he had 10 years before, when Svasti first met him not far from this very spot. 10 years before, they had spent hours sitting together on the banks of the Niranjara and beneath the shade of the Bodhi tree, just 10 minutes' walk from the river bank. Svasti glanced at the 20 bhikkhus behind the Buddha and saw that they too were barefoot and clad in patched robes of the same color. Looking more closely, Svasti saw that the Buddha's robe was a hand length longer than those of the others. Standing next to the Buddha was a novice about Swasti's age, who looked at him directly and smiled. Buddha gently placed his hands on Svasti and Rupak's heads and told them he had stopped by to visit on his way back to Rajagaha. He said he would be happy to wait while Svasti and Rupak finished bathing the buffaloes, so they could all walk to Swasti's thatched hut together. During the walk back, Buddha introduced Svasti and Rupak to his son Rahul, the young novice who had smiled so beautifully at Svasti. Rahul was 3 years younger than Svasti, but they were the same height. Rahul was a samanera, a novice, but he dressed much the same as the older bhikkhus. Rahul walked between Svasti and Rupak, handing his alms ball to Rupak and placing his arms lovingly around the shoulders of his 2 new friends. He had so much about Svasti and his family from his father that he felt he already knew them. The brothers basked in the warmth of Rahul's love. As soon as they arrived at Swasti's home, the Buddha invited him to join the Bhikkhu community and study the Dharma with him. 10 years earlier, when Svasti had first met the Buddha, he expressed his wish to study with him, and the Buddha had agreed to accept Svasti as a disciple. Now that Svasti was 21, the Buddha had returned. He had not forgotten his principles. Rupak led the buffaloes back to Mr. Rambhul, their owner. The Buddha sat outside Swasti's hut on a small stool, while the bhikkhus stood behind him. With earthen walls and a thatched roof, Swasti's tiny home was not large enough for everyone to come inside. Bala told Svasti, "Brother, please go with the Buddha. Rupak is even stronger than you were when you began tending the buffaloes, and I am quite capable of taking care of the house. You have looked after us for 10 years, and now we are ready to be on our own." Sitting next to the rainwater barrel, Bhima looked up at her big sister without saying a word. Svasti looked at Bhima. She was a lovely young girl. When Svasti met the Buddha, Bala was 6 years old, Rupak 3, and Bhima only an infant. Bala cooked for the family while Rupak played in the sand. 6 months following their father's death, their mother passed away in childbirth. Just 11 years old, Svasti became the head of the household. He found a job tending water buffaloes, and because Svasti was a good worker, he earned enough to feed his family. He was even able to bring buffalo milk home for little Bhima. Realizing that Svasti was asking her about her feelings, Bhima smiled. She hesitated a moment and then spoke softly. "Brother, go with the Buddha." She turned her face away to hide her tears. Bhima had heard Svasti mention his wish to study with the Buddha so many times, and she truly wanted him to go. But now that moment had arrived, she could not hide her sadness. Just then, Rupak returned from the village and, hearing Bhima's words, "Go with the Buddha," he understood that the time had come. He looked at Svasti and said, "Yes, brother, please go with the Buddha," and the whole family fell silent. Rupak looked at the Buddha and said, "Venerable sir, I hope you will permit my brother to study with you. I am old enough to take 4 of our family." Rupak turned to Svasti and, holding back his tears, said, "But brother, please ask the Buddha if you can come back and visit us from time to time." The Buddha stood up and gently stroked Bhima's hair. "Children, please eat now. Tomorrow morning, I'll return for Svasti so we can walk together to Rajagaha. The bhikkhus and I will rest beneath the Bodhi tree tonight." As the Buddha reached the gate, he looked back at Svasti and said, "Tomorrow morning, you do not need to bring anything. The clothes you are wearing are enough." That night, the 4 siblings stayed up late. Like a departing father, Svasti gave them his last advice on taking care of each other and the household. He embraced each of them for a long time. Unable to hold back her tears, little Bhima sobbed while her oldest brother held her. But then she looked up, breathed deeply, and smiled at him. She didn't want Svasti to feel sad. The oil lamp cast a dim light, but it was enough for Svasti to see her smile, and he appreciated it. Early the next morning, Sujata, Swasti's friend, came to say goodbye. The evening before, she had been the Buddha when she was on her way to riverbank, and he told her that Svasti would be joining the order of monks. Sujata, the daughter of the village head, was 2 years older than Svasti, and she too had met Gautama before he became the Buddha. Sujata gave Svasti a small jar of herbal medicines to take with him. They spoke only briefly, and then the Buddha and his disciples arrived. Swasti's brother and sisters were already awake to see their brother off. Rahul spoke gently to each of them, encouraging them to be strong and to take care of each other. He promised that whenever he was nearby, he would stop in Uruvela to visit them. Swasti's family and Sujata walked with the Buddha and the bhikkhus to the river bank, and there they joined their palms to say goodbye to the Buddha, the monks, Rahul, and Svasti. Svasti was overcome with both fear and joy. There was a knot in his stomach. This was the first time he had ever left Uruvela. The Buddha said it would take 10 days to reach Rajagaha. Most people travel more quickly, but Buddha and his bhikkhus walked slowly and with great ease. As Swasti's pace slowed down, his heart quieted. He was wholeheartedly immersing himself in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and this was his path. He turned around for one last glimpse of the only land and the people he knew, and he saw Sujata and his family as mere specks merging with the shadows of the forest tree. It seemed to Svasti that Buddha walked just to enjoy the walking, unconcerned about arriving anywhere at all. So it was with all the bhikkhus. No one seemed anxious or impatient to reach their destination. Each man's steps were slow, balanced, and peaceful. It was as if they were taking a pleasant stroll together. No one ever appeared tired, and yet they covered a good distance each day. Each morning they would stop in the nearest village to beg for food. They walked along the streets in a single line with the Buddha at the head. Svasti came last, just behind Rahul. They walked with quiet dignity, observing each breath and each step. Once in a while, they would stop while villagers placed offerings of food in their bowls. Some villagers knelt by the side of the road in respect. As the bhikkhus received the food, they quietly recited prayers for the people. When they finished begging, they slowly left the village to find a place beneath some trees or in a grassy meadow where they could eat. They sat in a circle and divided the food equally, careful to fill anyone's bowl that was still empty. Rahul filled a jug with water from a nearby stream and respectfully carried it to the Buddha. After the Buddha joined his palms together to form what looked like a lotus flower, Rahul poured the water over the Buddha's hands and rinsed them clean. He did the same for everyone else, coming last to Svasti. As Svasti did not yet have a bowl, Rahul placed half of his own food on a fresh banana leaf and gave it to his new friend. Before eating, the bhikkhus joined their palms and chanted together. Then they ate in silence, mindful of each bite. When they finished, some bhikkhus practiced walking meditation, some did sitting meditation, and others took a short nap. When the hottest part of the day had passed, they took to the road again, and they walked until it was nearly dark. The best places to rest for the night were undisturbed forests, and they walked until they found a good place. Each bhikkhu had its own cushion, and many sat cross-legged in the lotus position for half the night before spreading out their robes and going to sleep. Each bhikkhu carried 2 robes, the one he was wearing and another to use as protection against wind and cold. Svasti sat in meditation like the others and learned to sleep upon the earth using a tree root for a pillow. When the Svasti awoke the next morning, he saw the Buddha and many of the bhikkhus already sitting peacefully in meditation, radiating profound calm and majesty. As soon as the sun rose over the horizon, Each bhikkhu folded his extra robe, picked up his bowl, and began the day's journey. Walking by day and resting by night, it was 10 days before they reached Rajagaha, the capital of Magadha. It was the first time Svasti had been seen a city. Horse carts pressed through streets lined with crowded dwellings. Shouts and laughter echoed everywhere. But the silent procession of the bhikkhus continued as peacefully as they were strolled along the quiet river banks or between country rice fields. A few of the city dwellers paused to watch them, and a few, recognizing the Buddha, bowed deeply to show their respect. The bhikkhus continued their calm procession until they reached the bamboo forest monastery just beyond the city. News spread quickly throughout the monastery that the Buddha had returned, and within moments, nearly 400 bhikkhus gathered to welcome him back. The Buddha did not say much but asked about everyone's well-being and meditation practice. He entrusted Svasti to Sariputta, who was also Rahul's spiritual instructor. Sariputta was the novice master of Bamboo Forest Monastery and watched over the studies of nearly 50 young monks, all of whom had been in the community for less than 3 years. The abbot of the monastery was a monk named Kundana. Rahul was asked to introduce Svasti to the ways of monastery life, how to walk, sit, stand, greet others, do walking and sitting meditation, and observe his breathing. He also showed Svasti how to wear the monk's robe, beg for food, recite prayers, and wash his bowl. For 3 continuous days, Svasti did not leave Rahul's side so that he could learn these things well. Rahul put his whole heart into instructing Svasti, yet Svasti knew it would take years of practicing before he would be able to do these things in a relaxed and natural way. After this basic instruction, Sariputta invited Svasti into his hut and explained the precepts of a bhikkhu. A bhikkhu was one who left his family in order to follow the Buddha as a teacher, the Dharma as the path which leads to awakening, and the Sangha as the community that supports one along the path. A bhikkhu's life was simple and humble. Begging for food helped foster humility and was also a means to win contact with others and help them see the way of love and understanding which the Buddha taught. 10 years earlier, beneath the Bodhi tree, Svasti and his friends had listened to the Buddha speak about the path of awakening as the path of love and understanding. So it was easy for him to grasp all that Sariputta told him. Though Sariputta's face appeared serious, his eyes and smile radiated great warmth and compassion. He told Svasti that there would be a precept ceremony to formally accept him into the community of bhikkhus, and he taught Svasti the words he would need to recite. Sariputta himself presided over the precept ceremony. About 20 bhikkhus attended. The Buddha and Rahula were there, adding to Swasti's happiness. Sariputta silently recited a gatha and then shaved off several locks of Swasti's hair. He then gave the razor to Rahula, who completed the task of shaving Swasti's head. Sariputta gave Svasti 3 robes, a bowl, and a water filter. Because he had already been taught by Rahul how to wear the robe, Svasti put it on without difficulty. He bowed before the Buddha, and the other bhikkhus present expressed his deep gratitude. Later that morning, Svasti practiced begging for the first time as an ordained bhikkhu. The monks of Bamboo Forest Monastery walked into Rajagaha in several small groups, and Svasti was part of the group led by Sariputta. After taking just a few steps out of the monastery, Svasti reminded himself that begging was a vehicle to practice the way. He observed his breathing and took each step quietly and in mindfulness. Rahul walked behind him. Although he was now a bhikkhu, Svasti knew that he had considerably less experience than Rahul. He resolved with all his heart to nurture humility and virtue within himself.